don't think we're gonna need Zoom. I don't think anyone's joining via Zoom. If community board and that didn't light up.
Yeah, so I don't know which one it's on right now.
But that's
It's unmuted, yeah.
unmuted, yeah. No, something is wrong with this. She can get it from the video.
Okay.
You guys are live.
All right, well, good.
Thank you. We were trying to fix a tech issue, but it doesn't look like it's gonna happen. She can get it from the video, yeah. I'm going to call the meeting of Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee to order. Today is Monday, August 5th. The time is 7 p.m. and we are in the Aldermanic Chamber. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly, Chair.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens, Vice Chair. Here. Alderman Ernest Jetty. Alderman Thomas Lopez.
I'm here.
And Alderman Tim Senate is here.
Alderman Jetty let me know that he was unable to attend this evening. Alderman Moran will not be joining us.
Do you want to do the also joined, or do you want me to?
You can do
All
that.
right, we are also joined by Alderman Derek Tebow, Alderman Trish Klee, Mayor Jim Donchis, Tim Cummings, Administrative Services Director, Jennifer Deshay, Risk Manager, Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director, and Jill Stansfield, Parking Manager.
Got a room full tonight.
We sure do.
Okay. The first piece in front of us is public comment. I don't see any public. Great. Communications.
Communication has been received from Tim Cummings, Administrative Services Director, Nancy Trask, Human Resources Manager, and Lizzie Gouveia, Human Resources Specialist, regarding communications relative to certain projects being able to provide revenue.
If there's no objection, I will accept the communication and place it on file. Alderman Clemens.
Yeah, I did have a question if perhaps we can either discuss this now or later
No, it's fine.
with what's the comparable communities are. So I don't know what's appropriate.
Are any of the people who are on the communication, would you want them to come up and speak to it? I see Director Cummings.
Sure.
Let's do it now because I don't see our interviewee yet.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. First, I want to note, I think there was a typo. This is a memo or a communication relative to the salary survey. So I think there was a template memo used, and unfortunately the title carried over from the previous memo.
Okay.
The question at hand, I believe, is relative to the comparable communities and maybe how we arrived at that. I'm not necessarily sure, but what this memo tries to convey is we are starting to the salary survey compensation analysis that we told everyone we would do this year. We have just begun. I'd like the consulting team to come in and meet with this body at the next meeting, and I would be with them, along with the human resources team, to talk in more detail about the salary survey and how they are going about it, their methodology, as well as some of the market data that they're seeing. And that would be in preparation for when the results actually come to us, which we're anticipating in an end of September, October timeframe. And then ultimately it'll be up to the mayor and board of aldermen to implement those results if they're so desirous. But specifically, the memo calls out the comparable communities because this is what we are essentially saying our market is, and we want to compare ourselves to these like municipalities, and it was arrived at based on some socioeconomic demographics, size, median income, household sales, and also these are communities all within the Northeast region, which would have same labor type demands that we would. So the consulting team has an analysis that ranks the municipalities across the country. These are the ones that rose up to be most comparable to us. A couple of them that we suggested being added in, ironically enough, Concord and Portsmouth aren't as comparable to us, but because they are New Hampshire-based municipalities, we wanted to add them in. So that's a little background context on this communication. Happy to take any questions.
Alderman Clemens?
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's worthwhile to look at some of the lists that have come out ranking Nashua as one of the best-run cities, to see if any of those communities, how we compare to them.
We could absolutely do that. I think those are national type lists, so we may not have the same labor demands on salary, but we can absolutely look at those.
Okay, thank you.
I guess my question would be if we wanted to give input on those comparable communities, as Alderman Clemmons says, when your consultant comes in, will that be too late?
I hope not. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this in advance, right? Because I didn't want to get through the study and then have a conversation with everyone and hear that you're not necessarily in agreement with the comparable communities. Ideally, I'd like to make sure that once we agree to this comparable communities list, for the foreseeable future, we will use this to benchmark ourselves again. So I think having a deliberative conversation on this is really important.
I would echo Alderman Clemmons, and I'd like to see, I understand that they're not in the same region, but I'd like to see comparable cities as well, one or two, just to have some background in terms of what it's like for them.
Sure. Great, thank you.
Anyone else?
No?
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we are going to move on to interviews.
For the Cultural Connections Committee, we have Ada Nadir, 130 Flagstone Drive, Apartment 4, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03063, for a term to expire May 28th, 2027.
Thank you. I see them making their way over. Mayor Donchis, would you like to introduce your recommendation here, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I am introducing Ada Nadir, who I've nominated for the Cultural Connections Committee. She has been attending meetings of the committee and is very interested in helping to provide her perspective on the various communities we have in the city. Although fairly recent resident of Nashua, she's had a lot of experience working in New York City on issues relating to education, specifically education. She's been a parent healing ambassador and has had other experiences in the Bronx, obviously a borough of New York City. We need as many perspectives as we possibly can get on the Cultural Connections Committee. We have a lot of good people, but really I think we should include anyone who is interested in joining and helping to contribute. As you know, we have the fair coming up in September, and the multicultural fair, and we will, and Ada would be, of course, able to assist with that. So with that, I will give you Ms. Nadir and ask her to tell you a little about herself and of her interest in the Cultural Connections Committee.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Aida Nadir from Iraq. I moved from New York City almost 2 years with my husband and my daughter and my son. I am currently a student in Revere College University. I love helping, I love community, I love education. Anywhere I can communicate, help, I will do that. So I did very many volunteers in New York, in my son's school and other community. And I did here too, in his school. And I'm looking forward to help more if I can with my little time. But I have been attending the Cultural Connective Committee since I know them, so every month.
Okay. Questions or comments from the committee? Alderman Lopez.
So I was at Riviere probably 12 years ago when Dr. Ackerman informed me of the then Nashua Ethnic Awareness Committee's existence. It became the Cultural Connections Committee. So that's a great place to start, and I think Riviere doesn't get enough credit for the people that they introduced to Nashua. I think your perspective as a relatively new Nashuan, it could be very valuable on the Cultural Connections Committee because its purpose is to make sure that our government is accessible. And, you know, the longer you do something, the more you kind of take for granted how things are and the knowledge, the base knowledge of where things should be. It's good to have a fresh perspective. I liked looking at the different experiences that you have from other places as well. And I can tell that you're not going to be approaching this completely from scratch. You have your own valuable experiences too. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do with the Cultural Connections Committee.
Thanks.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for volunteering. I don't have any particular questions, but I do want to say, I'm not sure if you're a baseball fan, but I am a fan of the New York Yankees. So hopefully, you don't find many people
Someone needs to be.
up here who are. So I don't know if you are or not.
I was living
but-
next to Yankees. And always my train stops in the Yankee
Right.
there, but I never attended.
Ah, okay, all right.
unfortunately.
Well, I heard the mayor mentioned you worked in the Bronx, so, you know.
I
had to-
did, but not in this
Right.
field.
Okay.
I'm
Anyhow,
not in favor of the sport.
fair enough. Well, welcome, and I look forward to supporting you regardless of how you feel that way, so.
Alderman Senate.
And thank you,
I
Madam
love
Chair.
watching it, but not.
Yeah.
I'm a Sox fan, but we'll let it slide. First off, thank you for putting yourself forward to help with this. I think it's a very important committee that I still don't feel like it's recognized its full potential in the city. I feel like there's a lot that can be done with the Cultural Connections Committee. And something that I like about your resume is your wealth of experience in the field of education and working, it seems, with school children and their parents, because here in Nashua, we do have a very large English language learner community, and that can mean a whole wealth of cultures and backgrounds. And so I think having a variety of people within our community, especially with your experience, can be a really valuable asset. And I'd certainly like to see what potential the Cultural Connections Committee, that's a mouthful, could have in working with our public school children. So I'm really looking forward to supporting your nomination.
Yeah, I submitted my application in like a few months ago for working in school because I love education. I love working with kids. So I'm looking when they call me in September. Also, there is option say Arabic interpreter. So I did with the organization here a few times. They asked me to come to translate to Arabic community there. Mm-hmm. So one time I was in Manchester, one in the Nashua, but they said next one will be in September. But I don't know when, what date. But I'm ready to help.
I'm very excited to hear that because,
But
like I
if
said,
they call me in the school, I will go to that too.
I think people when they hear English language learner, I think probably just because of the multitude of folks that speak it around us, I think the mindset sort of jumps right to Spanish languages. But there really is a wealth around us, and so it's really exciting to see something like Arabic be presented. I work with a translator who works in Philippine language as well. So it's very exciting to see that diversity of languages start to pop up and be available to children in our schools who may be speaking languages. So welcome.
I speak also Turkish. So I speak Turkmen, but similar to Turkish, which
Another one we don't see
in my
a lot,
community
yeah.
we do. In Iraq, we have multiple languages, so I speak 3 languages. I can do a lot.
Well, thank you so much for putting yourself forward for us.
Thank you.
All right, I'll just say welcome to Nashua. I'm grateful that you are here and that you're willing to step forward. We have a great city, and I think you will be a great asset on the Cultural Connections Committee. And if you want baseball, I'm not going to get into Red Sox Yankees, although Red Sox are the best. We have the Nashua Knights, and they are incredible, and they are actually the first integrated baseball team in the country. So, they just finished their season, but you should go out for a night next year. So, thank you. That's it, I think, for. Did I miss someone's hand? I think that's it, yeah. We'll take up your nomination in just a minute.
All right, thank you, Madam
You're all
Chair.
set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's your favorite one.
Application to license hawkers, peddlers, iterant vendors license. Iterant,
When did we
There
have
are
an iterant?
iterant.
I don't remember ever having iterant in there.
I can't do it. Okay. Appointments by the mayor.
I will make a motion to recommend the following new appointment of Ada Nadir with a term to expire May 28th, 2027, to the Cultural Connections Committee.
You hear the motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Unfinished business.
There is none.
New business resolutions.
There are none.
New business ordinances.
In front of us, we have O-24-021, updating the insurance and risk management ordinances. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, so the motion is to recommend final passage. I believe that Director Cummings, who else wants to come up and sit and chat with us? I
We
think,
have Jennifer Deshay is with me as well, if we may approach.
yeah. Didn't know how many people you were bringing along.
So thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. So we are up here before you this evening. With me is Jennifer Deshay, the risk manager for the city, to discuss with you ordinance, a proposed ordinance change in O-2421. Essentially, to give a little background context, a year or so ago, I had met with the legal department along with Ms. Deshay, and we talked about the risk in insurance practices here in the city, and I asked that we do a review of our current ordinances for some housekeeping to make sure that we were just following current practices and procedure and specifically industry best practices. And so over the last year or so, Ms. Deshay and working hand in glove with the city's legal department, specifically Dory Clark, this resolution was created, I'm sorry, this ordinance was created and has now laid before you. So I'm going to ask Ms. Deshay to go through the ordinance paragraph by paragraph, just to speak to the specific changes, whether they're deletions or updates. But essentially what it is this ordinance does is it brings current practice to the administrative code that we have governing us. So with that being said, Madam Chair, I'd like to hand this over to Ms. Deshay.
Thank you. So as Tim just said, he asked us to go over the current ordinances that apply to risk management and make changes so they're reflected appropriately. So 5-40 departments on the first page, E, that updates the department name and the risk manager's title. Further down in that first paragraph again, it updates the lines of the insurance that are actually being handled by the risk management department. It deletes the custodial services to correctly reflect the department versus employees, and you'll notice in F is where it changes that. It adds buildings and grounds. On the next page, 5-59, Joint Employee Administration Health Insurance Advisory Committee. The only change there is we updated the title of the risk manager. 5-83, professional services. We standardized how we treat insurance professionals. 5-85, insurance. This section did not correctly reflect the process of purchasing insurance. That's not how we do it, so it was deleted. Section B on the next page, it's no longer valid. We brought the program in-house. We no longer hire third-party administrators to handle our claims. 50-10, insurance, self-insurance funds. This updates our lines of insurance. Section C on the same page at the bottom, this first part, it updates the titles. On the next page, due to time-sensitive nature of claims, we've always had the authorization as it relates to our financial obligations of the property and casualty program. Proposed claim settlements over 25 do require the authorization of the Finance Committee. 50-12, filing of complaints. We added the risk@nashua.gov so that the whole office receives the emails. Section 88-17, license required. This is for the amusements and the shows section. The insurance requirements have been corrected to make them more accurate and appropriate to the needs. On the next page, you'll see that the new paragraph replaces everything on that next page. The following page, 88-19, licensing of permanent place of amusement. This again just updates the language that was in there for insurance requirements. It duplicates pretty much what you saw on the last page. 156-8.1 is explosive materials code. Again, all it's doing is updating the language of the insurance. On the bottom of the next page, 160-1, prohibition of the Class C fireworks. It deletes what was in there and it updates the requirements. The next page, 231-11, vendor's license. Again, the same thing, it's just updating the insurance language. Next page, 285-10, newspaper, magazine, and vending machines. It updates the insurance language. At the bottom of that, 285-41, accident prevention and safety measures. Again, it's updating the insurance language. Next page, 300-2, vehicle licensing, the same. And that's the last of the insurance language. And what it is basically customizing the insurance language and standardizing it throughout the ordinances. And that's the last of the updates. Thank you.
Thank you. The committee seems intent. Does anyone have a question? Because I do if nobody's ready. Okay. So my question was around getting rid of the specific amounts of insurance. I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds. Completely trust that you know what you're doing, but I'm wondering how that's going to work in terms of
So we work with
determining
each
what
of the
is enough.
individual, I'm sorry, my apologies.
That's okay.
I can't hear her.
Can you not hear me?
No, no,
Oh, weird.
I
The
thought
audio's
she
been
said
weird
that.
when you're listening. Is that better?
much better. Thank
Okay.
you.
Did you
Thank
hear my question? You want me to ask it again?
One more time, please.
Sure. I asked around the removing of specific amounts of which, and you did it in several different places, insurance is needed, whether it's an event or a vehicle, that it would be at your discretion. So I just wanted to know how that would work in practice.
So currently, the practice is we work with the departments on the insurance language. It changes a lot in the industry, so reflecting it within the ordinances didn't make sense because the old language stayed there even though our practice changed. So this gives us the ability to change those requirements as needed based on the event or just an industry standard. So we're working with the departments. We put out a sheet. They know what the requirements are. If they have questions, they get sent over to risk management.
Okay, great. Alderman Clemmons, go ahead.
Yeah, in regards to that, if I was somebody that was in the community and I was interested in putting an event on, or if I was so new to the community, or for our partners like GAD who put on different events and things, like how right now do they know what to plan for in regards to how much insurance they have to have?
So it's actually located in the application. So
Okay.
you'll see when you first decide you're going to have an event and you put it through the events process, you're going to see it right in the actual application. And our office is in communication with each event holder at the very beginning, at the onset of planning these events.
Alderman Clemmons?
So how is that determined, I guess, and how often is it changed?
It's not changed, depending on the event and what it is. So if you decided, like you were going to have a birthday party over at, I don't know, let's say one of the parks. I don't even know if that's a correct example, but the insurance language is right now 1 million, 2 million, and it has been that for that event. But what we see in the language is it gets updated by departments, and language gets added there that isn't necessarily current or accurate for that matter. And so it's not just the amount. There's other language within those ordinances that has been updated. So if we change it, we're going to change it ahead of time. We're going to put it on the applications. And how it's determined is by the risk manager. And it's like that already in the ordinance.
Okay.
And this just customizes it and makes it pretty much equal across the different areas of the ordinance. It was all over the place with a lot of different language.
Okay.
I'm actually going to add here because I think where I was going was I was wondering if it will allow for some more flexibility. I don't know why my voice just died. Because I've definitely seen events that are like, oh, we're just going to do something small, and like that $1 million policy is really hard for them to acquire. So I was wondering if it'll allow you to like, oh, that birthday party probably doesn't need $1 million in coverage, but maybe there's protest.
And that does give us that, right?
Does give you
And
that,
it
okay.
also gives us the ability, if you're going to have a bounce house, it's a whole different requirement. There's a state requirement, there's the different requirements. So once we hear what the event is, it lets us customize the actual requirements that are needed for the event.
Perfect. That's what I was hoping for. Thank you. Alderman Lopez.
I do not recommend including a mechanical bull in most public events.
Correct.
Specifically for, it wasn't mentioned here, so I'm not sure if this is within, I'm sure it is within your department, but the signage on the sidewalks has got to be one of the things I've heard the most complaints about, because essentially, as it was written, if somebody tries to apply to put a sandwich board sign out on Main Street, for example, they have to have like $2 million, and I don't think that's meant to be, the sign is worth $2 million if it's broken. It's more like the organization has to be big enough to be able to deal with whatever happens to it. Is that something that would be addressed by this, and is that something that this legislation gives you a little more flexibility in addressing?
In the act of putting that sign there, it requires a permit to encumber, which is not under my jurisdiction. It's Department of Public Works. But the permitting itself requires the 1 million too, because the permit to encumber. So if you're going to need a permit to encumber, you're going to need insurance. And it's not based.
Scope of the encumbrance is different for different things?
Director Cummings.
Thank you. If I may, so yes, depending on the type of encumbrance, but more specifically, if you're talking about A-frame signs, that actually falls under the purview of community development and community development signage ordinance. and I don't believe that is allowed under the current sign ordinance, which they are the ones that are vested with the responsibility of administering. But then, depending on the sign itself, when it hangs over into the public way, then insurance is going to be needed in case there's an issue and there's a potential risk of someone being harmed. And so as the sign gets bigger, as the sign gets more detailed, as the sign gets heavier, appropriately so, differing type of insurance requirements may need to be applied.
A point of
Alderman
clarification.
Lopez? Yep.
Did you mean A-frames are not allowed on Main Street now?
So technically, A-frame signs are not allowed in the city of Nashua under our current sign ordinance.
I was not aware that changed. I've seen several A-frames.
Not sure that those are actually allowed.
If we just have them put them on a mechanical bull, though, that's okay,
All set, Alderman Lopez?
I guess. I think I have to look at an ordinance.
Other questions? Alderman Clements?
Yeah, so I just, I have no problem with this, because I like things that can be administered more easily. And I guess I didn't realize that, we weren't necessarily following the text of what was in here. So I guess I just would hope that as we go forward, these things are somehow noticed, I guess, that the cost of what it costs for a certain size event or whatever is sort of noticed, I guess, in the public. And if that goes up, then that's reflected with a, some kind of public notice. I don't know if we do that now or how that's reflected.
Director Cummings?
Thank you. I think that's an excellent and very fair point. I mean, I don't think there's any requirement anywhere, but I definitely think it's something that, as a matter of good public administration, if you were to see a change in the requirements, we would provide a good notice period, whether that's 90 days, 6 months, whatever the case may be. But we would not want to do something haphazardly or capricious, in a capricious nature. So I think you would see us do something where we would set out a date where a change would take effect.
Okay.
Okay, great. Set?
Yep.
All set? Alderman Clee?
Madam Chairwoman, as a person who's put on an event, and Alderman Lopez can speak to it as well, to be honest with you, I sent an email to a group, and individuals from that group, from fire, from insurance and so on, sent me back applications and so on with instructions on what I had to do. There was nothing on any particular website that gave me instruction. Each of them sent me the applications and so on that I had to fill. So there was no update of anything. Each of them sent me that. So if I were trying to do planning ahead of time, so to be honest with you, I think that's how I would have gotten my update. And Alderman Lopez can speak differently to it, but that's how I learned what insurance I had to have and what my requirements were and so on. So just speaking on my experience from it. So.
Alderman Lopez?
So there is a fairly comprehensive page on the city clerk's site about if you're doing a special offense, and they'll point you towards it. It doesn't mean that the individual departments don't create their own or update their own requirements, which is, I think, part of what this legislation addresses, is that there wasn't necessarily a continuity of how they were communicating insurance. And I know, for example, that public health might change or amend their own internal guidance, and then subsequently, that's what you're talking about when you're trying to do an event, is those departments will then communicate directly with the person. And that's kind of concerning me, I guess, because I very demonstrably tonight wasn't aware that we don't allow A-frame signs. I know they're out there, I've seen them, and to my knowledge, there was a permitting process for them as an encumbrance. So I'm concerned about giving departments more autonomy where they may be making changes that we just find out later, because it's an internal decision. Again, this is news to me, so I have to do research, and Director Cummings, I definitely would appreciate you forwarding me the ordinance that you're referring to, but I'm concerned about us putting into ordinances big, giant, open spaces that then the city departments can update on their own, particularly if we don't, to Alderman Clemens' point, if we don't also mandate that they do some sort of notification process, because the ordinance here updates, and my impression is gives more authority to the risk department to make sure that when you were talking about risk, the risk department is the one who's the authority on it, which is good. But that also is continuing the trend of, well, now we just find out later that a department did something that was formerly something that aldermen did. And if what I said was not fair, then please.
Director Cummings.
Thank you. Two very distinct issues. The sign ordinance is different than the insurance requirements. The insurance requirements are the after follow-on actions that come later on. The first conversation at hand is the signed ordinance, and I'll double check to see if and it's very specific. I want so whether certain signs are allowed in certain areas, and you have to go through a certain process, whether that's it's typically a sign permit process, and that's handled through community development, and if there is an encumbrance of the right-of-way, that is handled through DPW. And on occasions, could an A-frame sign be used for an encumbrance permit? That may happen on occasions, but it's probably for a specific reason. But as a by right, an A-frame sign is not allowed out in the public way, and is not an allowable sign. Now, if that's something that you'd like to change, I would encourage you to speak to Director Sullivan and planning manager Sam Durfree, and I know there's a land use code change that's occurring right now where you may be able to address some of these concerns. But if it was to occur, and when it does occur, then it needs to be regulated, and that's handled through the DPW, and they have certain requirements, one of which is the specific insurance requirements.
Other thoughts or questions? Alderman Lopez just made me go down a whole nother rabbit hole, but I'm gonna hold that for now. Okay, if there's no more questions. The motion on the floor is to recommend final passage. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, thank you. Are you staying for future pieces like the parking thing that we might be talking about next? Oh, no, we got one thing to kill, but we'll don't go. Okay.
All right. Next up before us is 024, 023, prohibiting electronic participation in meetings if the person is participating from outside the United States. I will enter a motion to recommend indefinite postponement.
The motion on the floor is to recommend indefinite postponement. Alderman Clemens.
Thank you. I am not going to make the motion, but I think out of courtesy to the main sponsor, we should probably table this.
So the main, I was about to talk to this.
Oh, okay.
The main
Yeah.
sponsor reached out to me and said that he had a discussion and was satisfied and would like to withdraw the
Oh, okay.
ordinance. So.
Great.
Alderman Lopez?
Per Mason's manual, if any of us that are voting in favor of it find out that it needs to be reconsidered, we could always just bring it back.
Correct. Everyone else set? Motion is to recommend indefinite postponement. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
Next up is 024, 025, amending the Keefe Auditorium Commission. I will enter a motion to recommend final passage.
Motion before us is to recommend final passage. Alderman Clements, do you want to start up? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So I put this ordinance together. The Keefe Auditorium Commission was established in 1988, and it was done basically as a way to have a group oversee the auditorium, you know, for the purposes of coordinating with the Board of Education for things like scheduling and maintenance and that sort of thing. And where the school department is going to relinquish control of the Elm Street Middle School, the thought process behind this was to update that commission and to task it with developing a plan to upkeep, renovate the auditorium so that it may stand alone. With the thought process being that with the RFP that's out there, that's per the Board of Aldermen, that's what the direction that this board wants us to go in. So we need a committee that's out there that is going to promote such a thing. And whereas there was already a Keefe Auditorium Commission in place, the thought process is to reestablish that commission, give it a new life and a new purpose, and hopefully move that conversation along. The way that this works is that it will basically appoint, the mayor will have 2 appointees, plus the mayor can appoint one of his staff members. And then the president of the Board of Aldermen will have 3 appointees as well. My hope is that the mayor and the board president will coordinate to make sure that the key players who are currently on the commission, including its chairman, are one of the appointees, as well as I've been told, I have not spoken to him myself, but I know that perhaps maybe Sean Smith from the school department is interested in that as well. So there are key players out there that hopefully, you know, the mayor and Alderman Wilshire can work for that. And then the other piece of it too is that there will be 2 non-voting liaisons from the Board of Aldermen. So that's the crux of this. Basically takes the purview of this away from the Board of Education, which is no longer necessary, and puts it to the Board of Aldermen, and it gives it a new purpose, which is to make sure, try to get a plan in place so that the Keefe Auditorium can stand alone.
Questions from the committee? Alderman Lopez and Alderman Senate.
To, I guess, the maker of the amendment, what was the thought process behind taking out section C, where it restricts the eligibility to, there has to be representation from the arts community or musicians that would be performing there, or something to that effect?
Yeah, I had thought about that, but I think that it speaks to itself that you want people who are passionate about the building and passionate about the its future to be on that committee. And I think restricting it in ways where it's certain types of like you have to be in, like, for example, let me just read what was in there. There was very specific, like, you had to be. No, I have it in front of me. I'm reading it here. affiliated with the Nashua community at large, with an interest in the arts. You know, I just think it's, to me, yeah, somebody designated with a registered music group or theater group. You know, I think those things, those types of restrictions to me in an ordinance are too narrow, and you begin to exclude people who may be of value on a committee like that because they're not necessarily in a, quote, registered music or theater group, but they could have a lot of passion for the Keefe Auditorium for another reason. Maybe they think that just the value of that being in Nashua is worthwhile, and they want to put their effort towards keeping it there, keeping it here. I think one of the things that we have to understand is that the focus of this, the idea behind this commission is to kind of refocus the commission to be one that looks at the future of maintaining that building and puts into place a plan that would be viable to maintain that building. So you have to have folks on there that obviously have an interest in the arts community and have an interest in keeping that facility in Nashua, but I think it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who is related to one of the groups that may end up being the ones who use it. So that was my thought process behind that. I didn't want to get too restrictive on who we were appointing in there. So I think the broad judgment of this committee and the mayor and the president of the Board of Aldermen, I think should be used.
Are you all set, Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, I intend to support this because, as Alderman Clemmons has pointed out, the mayor and the president will be the ones doing the appointment. And I know this administration, and I know that they're going to focus on the needs of transitioning Keefe into a more independent state, which means you need stakeholders who know what they're doing, not necessarily card-carrying members of a specific group. I also take to heart the point that there may be groups we didn't anticipate in this originally. Like, I don't know that, like, the b-boy culture would have been represented here, but they might have an interest in an auditorium space, and they may be major supporters in the future. I would just hope that at some point we are attending to what the committee is doing, because there's a lot of people with a lot of different ideas about what the Keefe Auditorium or any auditorium space could be used for, and I wouldn't want to see it like drift off into just, I'm not saying just a community center, but if we renovate it and put chairs that can be removed and suddenly it's like an indoor soccer stadium or something, because 10 years down the line we have different stakeholders involved, they might see that. And then conversely, I think at a point where we're trying to determine the Keefe Auditorium's future, I hope we appoint people who represent the organizations who might be able to make that happen, because if I'm drawing on my experience with the Court Street Theater, the stakeholders there very much want more investment and more involvement in how decisions are made and the oversight of that building, and they're willing to bring resources to the table. So I think if something similar were possible at Keefe, that might be resources that we're going to need to really see it, take off. So I'm not going to oppose this at all. I just hope that we make good decisions over the next couple of years, because I really want to see the Keefe Center take off and be sustainable.
I'm going to respond because I also have thoughts on that, and then I'll let you go, Alderman Senate.
I'm actually all set.
Okay. I actually agree with Alderman Lopez here, and here's why. I think I understand you're wanting to open it up a little bit, but through seeing the Art Center happen and sitting on 2 of these boards, I think it's really important to have somebody who's actually doing this work. Like, for example, how do we load in the instruments? And I know Lindsay Grinaldi was really instrumental.
Fine.
I know, I said it and I was like, oh, that's cute. In giving us some of that insight into what it's like to bring a huge instrument upstairs. So I think I would be interested if you were open to at least getting some language in there, because I think those types of insights, or I know that some of the the organizations that I've sat on the board on said it was hard for us with scheduling with the school, but now that the school's gone, you're not going to have that input if you don't have at least one person kind of directly tied to that kind of stuff. And I think that's stuff that those specific people will have really good insight on, but we wouldn't necessarily know otherwise. And I think Alderman Clee wants to also weigh in because she was on that committee. Alderman Clee, go ahead.
I agree 100% with exactly with what you're saying, but I think to what Alderman Clemens is saying and what Alderman Lopez has said, I think opening up the point of view and getting different aspects of it, we may see different uses for the Keefe. Let's be very honest and straight here. The symphony has probably taken a different route right now. Mm-hmm. So Ms. Rinaldi's, she was invaluable to the design of the art center, and I'm not saying that we would have failed without her, because I think we wouldn't have, but she was invaluable. There's no doubt about it. But I think we would have come in a different way. So I think we will be successful. And I think the two people that are pointing them will look at things from a different point of view. So you are 100% right. We need that kind of look, but I think we'll think outside the box. So I think by not tying our hands to these groups breaks those chains. And maybe President Wilshire or the mayor will say, no, I want someone from the National Arts Commission. Mm-hmm. But maybe they won't. Maybe they'll say, you know what, I think I'd like something from this dance group or something like that that's not part of the normal National Arts Commission or something of that. So for that reason, I kind of like this, think outside the box. But I do agree with what you're saying, because for me, her voice was so invaluable, because I kind of just sat there thinking I hadn't thought about how we needed that space and so on, because the only thing I thought about was the bathrooms. So, and I made my opinion very, very loud and clear, so quite often. Thank you.
Clemens, did you want to respond?
No, I'll yield to
Alderman
Alderman
Tebow. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know I'm not part of the committee.
Neither was I.
But I just want to say that, I agree with Alderman Clemens. I think there's no reason why you can't still put a Lindsay Rinaldi type on there. I think that would be great, because she's awesome. But, I think you can still do that in this, but it doesn't limit. And I think that's the point. The way it is now, it limits. So I just think it's, I trust the people that are, to Alderman Lopez's point, we don't always know what 10 years down the road who's going to be running the show. But I think I trust the current administration to make the right thing. And just a question to Alderman Clemens, the maker of the motion. Did you say there was 2 alternates as well? Or just alderman alternates, or were there?
Non-voting aldermanic alternates.
Non-voting?
Non-voting, yeah.
Is that alderman or just alternates?
No, non-voting
No,
alderman.
Non-voting
Alderman.
There's a, if I could, Madam Chair.
Alderman Clemens, please.
There's a non-voting liaison and a non-voting backup liaison, I guess, if you will, alternate
Some
liaison.
committees have alternates, like planning board.
Yeah, it has an alternate, but they're not, neither one is voting.
Alderman, no.
Alderman.
An alderman,
Correct.
yes,
Two
There are no
non-voting
alternates in
aldermen,
here.
One's an alternate.
right.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Clemens.
Thank you. So one of the other things to keep in mind with this project, unlike the Performing Arts Center, right, where we had a blank slate. Obviously, we had a limited size of what we could do. This is not that. This is an existing theater from the 1930s that's been renovated. I think the last time was in maybe the 80s. And in addition to that, we're hoping that there's a way that we can utilize buildings that are in the back currently of there to add like bathrooms, a concession area, that type of thing. So it's going to be a weird renovation, right? Because we're trying to basically use what is existing there. And you need somebody on that committee that has that expertise. And I think, you know, it has to be a balance of people, right? There has to be people that, as I mentioned, like Sean Smith, which I hope he would take the position because he knows the building like the back of his hand. You need somebody like that has that knowledge. Mr. Schneider is the chairman. You know, he knows the theater like the back of his hand and has lots of ideas of what we could do. But then there might be people out there that know how to fundraise, that know how to get people, or, you know, to open up their wallets and basically contribute to what might be a renovation or capital fund project, right? And you need people in there that know how to market, and there's different things that come to mind. So again, the point of keeping this open is to make sure that we have a variety of voices. Obviously, the community groups that use that theater, yes, we want them involved, because hopefully the idea is that they will continue to use this theater for, you know, a century to come, right? So while I agree that, yes, I want those people involved, I don't think we should necessarily restrict it or put a restriction in for one of them.
That's fair. I have a question. Alderman Lopez, go ahead.
I was just going to add on to Alderman Clemens' point. His ideas are right on point, because on the Joint Special Committee, we just watched Alderman Dowd and Mr. Smith figure out how to retrofit all the schools with security vestibules using largely an existing infrastructure. So I think the out-of-the-box thinking, I don't know that I would have necessarily tagged Alderman Dowd as I mean, he's obviously really good at renovating and building, but I think there's a lot of credit to be said for the idea of thinking outside the box in approaching this project.
Okay. All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yes.
So my other question is, I know that we amended the RFPs to make sure that this would be preserved. My question is, the last sentence in A, does that preclude us from negotiating? Dreamboat, someone comes in, wants to renovate it, and, you know, have a public-private partnership to keep the Keefe and do, you know, a gorgeous renovation. Does this keep us from doing that?
Does what?
Are you following me? Alderman Clemens, go ahead.
The last, so
The
this
commission shall be
include-
responsible for developing a plan to upkeep and renovate the auditorium such as it could stand alone, including developing a design, capital campaign, and funding recommendations.
I mean, if I could answer that, my opinion is no, I don't think it does, because obviously if a developer comes in, basically standalone, meaning that, like, if a developer comes in and they decide to demolish the rest of the school, and that's the plan that we go with, obviously we don't want them to demolish that portion of it. So that's what sort of standalone means. However, if they come in and they want to keep the building, that's fine too, but it still has to be separated in the sense of, like, it has to be able to function on its own, meaning, like, so it's a double meaning, and you can look at it either way, but essentially, no, we want the theater to function on its own being, whether it's physically standing there by itself or whether it's separated somehow from the rest of what's already there.
Okay. Any additional questions? Did you want to add anything, Director Cummings?
I think Alderman Clemens summed it up perfectly well. I can say, as the person who wrote the RFP, I wrote it exactly as just espoused, and that's exactly how I would envision it to unfold. I don't know what we'll get back for proposals, but we made it very clear in the RFP that we would entertain either the existing building staying, with the understanding that the city would like to keep the Keefe Auditorium, and we would need to understand what that structure would actually look like, but it would be an ongoing active negotiation between the city and that prospective developer, or if a proposer submits something that the city likes and it's a demolition of the existing building, it's understood that we would be looking to preserve as a standalone the existing structure, and we would anticipate needing to subdivide the land appropriately so the city would have the site control as necessary. So I think the RFP is written in a way, and we're going to make it clear to the development team the expectations of the city.
Great. All right, motion on the floor is to recommend final passage. Are there any additional questions or comments from my colleagues? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. We are taking a few things off the table.
We sure are. I'd like to start by making a motion to remove from the table O24014.
You've heard the motion. There's a wow. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
All right. Now before us is O24014, increasing fees and fines in the parking ordinances. I'll make a motion to recommend final passage.
All right, thank you. This was put on the table, I don't know, a month ago at least.
At least.
And I know
Couple
that
months, I
Alderman
think.
Klee had some questions and concerns. There's been quite a significant amount of work done by the team that's about to sit down with us, as well as I know some of the aldermen. So once you guys are settled, I would love to have a quick overview of the changes.
Just like when the Avengers showed up, I was all alone before.
I know, like you got a whole group. Just a reminder
I
to
was gonna
state
ask
your
if you
name
had
and
showered,
title
but-
when you speak so that the
Obviously.
transcription person
You didn't say when.
gets all of your voices.
Okay. This is the latest and greatest.
Thank you.
So I'll do a quick recap, and then Jill can go over the changes that were made based on your suggestions and comments last time. We
Name and title?
passed the, I'm sorry?
Name and title.
Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director. Thank you. We passed the downtown parking study recently this year, and this is the first section of ordinances that are moving towards taking some of those recommendations and implementing them. This one specifically is mostly about the fines and fees. And I know Jill did a comprehensive look at the ordinance last time. And so I'll pass it over to her to just go over quickly the updates and changes she made based on your comments.
Great.
Oh, I'm gonna just quickly, in your packets, you got the original versions instead of the updated document.
Okay.
So that's what Jill just passed out to you, is the updated version with your comments, sorry.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Yeah, I was actually just comparing
Okay.
it. Alderman Klee? Yeah, I was confused. Yeah.
So the one that we have here is the one that you want to pass, this particular one. Is this correct?
The one that we handed out
See,
tonight,
this
yes.
is what's in the packet, unless you changed it. The packet says 7/24/24, proposed amendment 02414.
There's two in the packet, actually.
Is that the problem?
Page
Okay.
1 says 8.5, and then it goes to 7.24.
There,
Okay, so both are in here.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, yep.
so it is right in, it's just, there's double. Okay, great.
Yes.
All set? Everybody good? Go ahead, Ms. Stansfield.
Jill Stansfield, Parking Manager. We just wanted to make sure it was clear that this was the latest and greatest version. I thought that might have been a little bit confusing, so I wanted to make sure everybody knew which one was the accurate version. So we had gone through, based on our last meeting, and we made some of the recommended changes. So I'll briefly speak to those. Under section 32048, so that was page 6. We added the library annex lot, as that will become day parking. That was not in the original list, so we had that added. And then if we jump to 320-53, shot 1, page 8. We cleaned a few things up under the table here. I know there was a concern last time relative to a couple of parking lots that were listed that should not have been, so we cleaned that up. Under number 1, we had the flats on High Street Garage. That was changed, the name to the School Street Parking Garage, and it's its own separate zone. That was previous legislation that was passed separate from this. So we cleaned that language up to reflect accurately. Under number 2, the library annex lot was listed here, and that's the one I just spoke about. We put that under the metered lot section as opposed to being in the facilities permitted section. And then under number 3, the library staff lot was listed, and we didn't want to give Jen McCormick a heart attack, so we removed that. I'm not sure how that got in there, but that was removed, so that is now reflected accurately. And then we also did some work relative to 32089, so we jump ahead a little bit. I believe it's page 13, if I'm not mistaken. And we did a little bit of work on this one. We had quite a discussion last time we were here relative to some excessive repeat offenders for violations. So we had a lengthy conversation about that, and what we did proactively before we came back before you, and worked very closely with the police department to develop language that would allow us to work well with the police department in coordinating any sort of towing efforts for excessive repeat offenders. And so we updated that language, and I believe that is, we actually also did another, just a clarification from the police department. They had asked us to make sure it was clear the violations, what type of violation they are, because they are listed as either a revenue, a nuisance, public impact. So we worked closely with the police department on how we could make sure there was no confusion as to what type of violation it may be, what it would fall under, the classification and the fine amount. And so what we did with our legal department is under the violations table, you will see each violation actually has its classification title, if you will, right next to it. So that was another request by the police department, and we put that in there. And I believe that covers all of the housekeeping that we did. Are there any questions?
Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just wanted to point out one of the things that, when I spoke to Ms. Stansfield, is that working with the police department, it brings the fines out to that they look back 3 years. So it's not just that they look for the last 12 months or something. If this behavior goes on for, you know, a 3-year period or something, they have that look back. So and you'll see that little star under 320-89, unpaid or repeated non-moving violations. FERC says repeat offenders of any public impact, life safety, major life safety, et cetera, et cetera. It says unpaid preceding fines up to 3 prior years will count towards the number of repeat violations and may be subject to towing and all associated fees at the parking manager's discretion. And the police are on board with this, so she worked very hard at this, and I do appreciate all the work that she did. I appreciate all the work that bringing in the PD and so on. I think it's a valid effort. We're going to find some glitches, trust me. and we're going to find certain people that are going to find loopholes and so on. It's not going to be perfect. I want to say right up front, I appreciate all the hard work that Ms. Stansfield have done. I appreciate all the hard work that the police have done working with her. I appreciate all the hard work that everybody has done, and this committee has done as well. So thank you so much, and indulging me and the troublesome issues that we have had in the ward, and thank you. I'm sure that I will be calling Ms. Stansfield and going, we forgot something. We will amend it when that happens. If it happens, fingers crossed it doesn't, but thank you so much for all of this. Thank you.
All set? Alderman Clemens and Alderman Lopez.
I'm sorry, I missed the last, the meeting when this was proposed originally. I just have a question between Zone 3 and 4. Currently, there's Zone 1, 2, and 3, right? So what is contemplated with 3 and 4?
I'm not sure I'm understanding the question.
What's the difference between Zone 3 and Zone 4?
Zone 3 and Zone 4. So Zone 4, it's its own zone. That's for the new flats.
Oh.
Parking garage.
Oh, okay, okay. My only concern with this is the time limits on the streets in Zone 3. Because 9 to 6 is a 9-hour period, correct? Am I doing the math correctly, or is it an 8-hour period? So why would we put, right now, we have business owners that park in that section and they will pay all day. And we want them to, right? Because that's where we want them to go if they have to. By doing this, you are now going to risk them up to a fine in that last hour, or how, you know. I guess I would assume to get rid of this, because I think that it's going to hurt some folks. We want employees to be able to park all day and pay, and that's where we want them to do it. So I think by adding that extra hour in there, you're potentially hurting some people.
I think.
So, yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Go, no, so I'd like to know why that was proposed, I guess, or.
I think we'll refer to our consultant here, Andy Hill, about the reasoning why.
For the record, Andy Hill, Senior Associate, Desmond. I am the city's parking consultant. And prior to this, Zone 3 had no time limit prescription on it whatsoever. 8 hours was a first attempt to put some sort of prescribed limit on it so that you didn't have vehicles being stored ad nauseum up to the 48 to 72 hour limit that you have per state statute. But your insight is acute and absolutely accurate, and I see no reason not to raise to a full 9-hour maximum length of stay rather than an 8-hour length of stay.
Alderman Clemens?
So I think what we should do is perhaps propose to amend it by replacing it with this copy and then further amending by changing that. So just to make it simple. So I'm going to make the motion to propose with what is in
Goldenrod,
front
with
of
just
you.
in
I guess
goldenrod?
You can call this the goldenrod or the copy presented this evening.
Motion on the floor is to amend to the goldenrod copy in front of us.
And that is referring to 32049 for the time limits in Zone 3. It would be 9.
No, he's doing a first, just to
Oh,
put,
okay. Sorry.
technically, we didn't
sorry.
actually, we took it off the table, but we didn't do the amendment.
Okay.
So give us 1 second and we'll get there. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
And anybody opposed? Okay. So now it's in front of us. Now we can make additional edits. Alderman Clemens, I know you want to make one. I also have a couple. Do we want to do them all at once, or do you want to make them one at a time?
One at a time, please.
Yeah,
You can only make 2 amendments. So.
But for the clerk's sanity, I think it would make sense to do them one at a time.
I'm still doing your first one, so.
Oh, the first one was just accepting what we have.
I know, but I still need to write
The
it.
non-goldenrod copy.
So if I could, Madam Chair?
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. So it's 320-49, Section A. You'd want to change where it says number 2, in Zone 3, from 9 to 6 p.m. daily, except for Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays with a 9-hour time limit.
Okay.
And then further down in 320-50, Section C,
Same.
number 3, you would want to say a 9-hour time limit.
Do you have to change that to 7 o'clock instead of 6?
What was it? What was it?
I don't think so.
No, because
No.
9 to 6 is
No,
9
that's
hours.
just when the meters are.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are proposing changing zone 3. Did you get that?
So the first motion is to amend 320-49, section, or part 2? 2.
Section A.
329-49A,
Section.
A2.
Subsection 2.
subsection 2,
Yeah.
and, well, 2 9 hours.
To
A 9-hour time.
9-hour limit.
And related to that, in the same motion, is section 320-50, section C, subsection 2, or I'm sorry, subsection 3 to 9 hours.
What's that?
Yes.
Committee, we've heard the motion. Discussion on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Do you further amendments, Alderman Clemmons?
That was my only one.
Okay. Well, mine is in the same section, so if you don't mind, Alderman Lopez,
Okay.
while we're in here. So my question was around 320-49-3. My worry and my question to the consultant is that we leased out parking spots to people who live in the flats in a different garage, and now we're making it non-time limited. So what's keeping them from all just taking up those spots which were supposed to be public?
A much higher rate structure now.
Can you explain that more for us?
Sure. It's a escalating rate structure, so it'll start at $2 an hour, and then hour 3, I believe, it goes up to $4 an hour, and escalates from there, so that it will discourage people from staying all day.
I'm mostly worried overnight than all day.
Yeah.
But that works overnight as well, the escalating?
Yeah.
And did I miss where that is outlined?
It was outlined in a previous ordinance where we,
Okay, so it's not in this ordinance?
right, yeah.
Okay.
Madam Chair. Matt Downing, Parking Department. It actually is under a couple pages back, 320-47. You can see it, Part A, 1, 2, 3, and 4, that outline the 4 specific zones.
Yep.
And that shows you the rates per section of the city.
Okay, yeah.
4, I see it, okay. All right. I'm gonna let Alderman Lopez and I have one more question. Alderman
So
Lopez, go ahead.
my first question is relevant to that. I saw that Zone 2 and 3 still have overnight parking, which I think is a really good idea considering they're located by, all the bars, and there's also a lot of residential in the area. But I was confused by Zone 4 not having overnight parking.
Jill Stansfield, Parking Manager. So Zone 4 is a 24/7 operation. You would be paying for parking 24/7.
Okay, so your average person doesn't park in there and stay overnight? Or we wouldn't count that under that program anyway?
They may,
You-
They can
you
park in there
could, You're just gonna pay for it.
right.
Apparently a lot. Okay, well, I was just curious because I'm not necessarily a cheerleader for that particular building, especially if they keep leaving their lights on. But I figured I would at least check. And then I wanted to express appreciation for the way that will probably work out for High Street residents too, because while we do have reserved parking for Delanus, what we found is they don't all have access to the doors down there. So I think the city is being very responsive, and I appreciate that.
All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yep.
I'm gonna ask what I could potentially be a silly question, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. So the escalation schedule, is that in addition to? So if I get a $15 ticket, day 1 through 5, now it's $30? And then in days 16 through 30, now it's $50? Or is that the fee
Yeah.
in total?
Right.
With the original ticket?
Yes. So
Second one.
If you get a ticket on day 1 and pay it on day 5, it is $15 for that.
If
Yeah.
it started as a $15.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Okay, so that first one, I guess it's just a little confusing because it says escalation, but that first one isn't actually escalated. That's the
Right.
original parking fee.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. It wasn't that though. Alderman Lopez, go
I
ahead.
just forgot to ask. So it's my understanding from various community sources that Clock Tower uses their visitor parking essentially as High Street. So are they going to be informed that Saturdays now their visitors are going to be charged? Because that would probably be good to make sure everybody in the area knows that those lots are now going to be billable on Saturdays.
Jill Stansfield, parking manager. Yes, we plan to put out plenty of notice to folks. I foresee a 3-month, even maybe a 6-month notice to the public.
Implementation, yeah.
When does this take effect?
So right at the back, I think it's on the last page, the ordinance shall take effect not earlier than July 1st, 2024, and after any necessary equipment and/or signage has been installed. So it's going to take us some time to implement this, and like I said, I foresee a 3 to most likely a 6-month notice to the public to allow us to put everything into place. Signage and equipment and updating our software and stuff like that, so.
Okay.
That was gonna be my question as
Yeah.
well, is how are we informing
Right.
people of the changes and what sort of grace period will happen as we're all getting on board with the new stuff?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Alderman Clemmons,
if
go
I
ahead.
could, yeah, that's gonna require a press release, I think, because I mean, people know that, oh, park in the garage on the weekend, park in the garage on Saturday, so that is gonna require a lot of education and a lot of education through, I would hope, through GAD, and the Downtown Improvement Committee can hopefully help with some of that, because that's been the case now, since we changed, the last time we changed the parking rates, I think was 2012, so, or 2011, actually, so, yeah, long time.
Alderman Clee, are you all set? Sorry, Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, I'm all set, thank you.
I have some disappointment.
And?
I don't mind the fees not going into place till 1 year, but those fines and all of that other thing not going into effect for 1 year, meaning that all of our bad actors. So is it just the fees aren't going, in other words, the parking fees aren't going to go into effect as of July 1st, but all of the bad actors aren't going to go into effect as of July 1st?
Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director. So this is actually July 1st of this year, so we're actually already
2024,
past.
what am I thinking here? Okay.
Yeah, so this could go into effect technically as soon as it is approved, but we would need some time to implement it. So the fines are going to be much easier to implement than the
Right.
fees.
Okay.
So our implementation plan is going to be kind of a staggered approach. So likely our fines will go in place first.
Right. But as far as like the parking fees and things like that, that's going to take us a good 6 months or so. And we're going to make sure we do public notices.
Yes.
I have no problems with that. I just don't want to see us taking 6 months to a year before we start implementing issues with bad actors and so on.
Yes,
So-
those can take, those are going to get implemented
I-
pretty much right away.
Right, I still would like us to get this out to people to let them know that we're putting this into place.
Yeah.
I still like to give the public warning
Yeah.
that this is in place so that everybody knows that, but I would like this the sooner the better. Thank you.
No, I didn't.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, I had one other question. So, right now, so how is High Street going to work? And is Elm Street part of that, or is Elm Street still gonna be free on the weekend? Well, that's my first question.
Jill Stansfield, parking manager. So both garages, High Street and Elm Street, will still be the same. They're part of Zone 3. The bottom level is quote-unquote the metered level.
Right.
So the upper levels are the reserved levels in both garages. So the metered level will still remain open for overnight parking.
Yeah, no, I guess my question is, like, let's say there's a big event, like I'm thinking the holiday stroll happens on a Saturday, right? Now, I don't know if that's within that, I don't think that's within that free time period. So, big event like that, the garage fills up. I would assume we would want it so that everybody who goes into that garage is gonna pay, right? So how, right now, all the spaces, the only spaces that have the meters are those first levels. Are we moving the numbers up so that there's a number on every single space in the garage?
Yeah, we have a couple of options. We can do that, or we can, we've been pretty successful with our mobile payment vendor, or options there as well, so we can do both. So we have some options to do that, yes.
I just want to, I guess, I wanted to bring that up because a lot of times those first level spaces are just, they're not open, and so people go up to the second level, myself included. I've done it even though it's technically a leased space. It's just always been the practice that it is what it is, right? So I just want to make sure that we're not segregating the garage for what is a common practice of somebody coming in, and because then what you'll have is nobody parking on the first level. They'll go up to the reserve level and park and not have to pay. I just want to make sure that we're capturing that on every space there's some way to indicate, no, you have to pay regardless of where you are parking in the garage.
So Jill Stanfield, parking manager. We actually are planning to go to a gate system. So that is gonna kind of help with that confusion part of it, I think. But again, this is all gonna take some time to implement. I also foresee, like the holiday stroll, and again, the Board of Aldermen can also weigh in on this, but during declared snow emergencies, we are gonna still have to open those garages up for the public to help Public Works clear the streets. So I think, you know, as we work through this, and Alderwoman Clee said it best, we're gonna be fine tuning this, I think, as we go along. This is just the first piece to the puzzle to get the whole ball rolling. We're gonna be coming back before the Board of Aldermen. I foresee infrastructure, maybe some of the other committees, to start really cleaning up some of the parking ordinances. There's a lot of areas that we may also need to look at adding metered spaces to, or removing metered spaces to, but this was really the kind of the first integral piece to get the whole ball rolling. But I think it's a great question, and I think it's something we definitely need to have a conversation about.
Director Cummings?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to remind folks, when we were before you a few months back, what we described is that there'd be a couple tranches or buckets, and so this was bucket one, and you know I would anticipate 3, 4, 5 other omnibus pieces of legislation that would address some of these other issues to come before you. This was just the first step of what will be a multi-step process.
Right. Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, and I don't want to put I'm one of those folks that the way I look at things, right, is you don't want to, you want to have the whole picture in front of you, and you want to be able to implement the most important part of that, and to me, it's equity. So what I don't want to see happen is that we roll these new fees out, and there's nothing on the upper levels of the garage, and so people start parking there because they feel like they don't have to pay, and then we start fining them because there's no signage or because we're planning to do something else in the future. I just want to make sure that whatever we do, it's equitable, it's known. That's just my largest concern.
So if I may, Jill Stansfield, Parking Manager, that is a great point, and it's something that would not happen without the right pieces in place. We just encountered this with the flats parking. We originally were going to go with pay stations and then realized we weren't going to be able to manage it properly. So we've kind of tweaked how we're moving forward with that. We're going to be putting in a gate system over there. So we would not fine people if we don't have the right signage in place. That's why I think this is going to be a several-month rollout, and one of my goals will be to implement this properly. And I think it is going to require some putting heads together and really working to kind of get some of these details worked out. But we literally just went through the same process with trying to implement the flats parking facility. And so to do it right, we had to make some changes as we work through it.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what you mean by gate system, because I guess I don't want the garage, not the full garage, not be able to be accessed by the public at any time. So hopefully you mean a gate system on either end when you're going into it, and not putting a gate to restrict access to the upper levels.
It'd be a heck of a U-turn.
Yeah. Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director. It is going to be open to the public, so the gate system will be at the entrance too.
Okay,
So we're not going to restrict it.
Great.
Yeah.
Anyone else? I believe we made your amendment? We made your amendment.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So then we still need another motion, right?
Recommend final passage.
Motion, final
We're
passage,
back to the original.
as amended.
Okay.
If I may, Madam Chair, before you.
No, you're not. Go. Go.
I did want to take, Madam Chair, if I could, a moment to, if I could share my screen, so I don't know if that's possible.
Yes.
Are you on the left or the right?
He's on your left.
I was going to say, I think I'm on left.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So,
There we go.
thank you. So, Madam Chair, again, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative
pull that up?
Services. I just wanted to take a quick second and remind everyone that what you're about to do this evening has been studied in detail for a while, and we didn't just make up these numbers, but we compared ourselves to communities. And I thought it would behoove us to just remind, not just you all, but the general public, that, we studied Albany, New York, Ann Arbor, Michigan, Asheville, North Carolina, Concord, New Hampshire, Lowell, Massachusetts, Manchester, New Hampshire, Missoula, Montana, Portland, Maine, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Rochester, Minnesota, and West Hartford, Connecticut. And we very early on set these out as our comparable communities when we started this parking study. And so, I applaud the parking department and this body in taking the time to be as deliberative as you are, and I appreciate the hard work that went into arriving at this legislation today. And I want to make sure folks know that this was not done in a vacuum, but done with a lot of confidence. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If you didn't blow it up, I can't see it. Alderman Lopez.
Thank you for comparing us to Montana.
Okay, the motion before us is to recommend final passage as amended. Any additional comments, questions, concerns? Great.
You can put it to the middle again.
Huh?
I just said he can put it to the middle again, clerk's desk.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you for your time.
All right. Next up, I'll make a motion to remove from the table O-24-016.
Motion is to remove O-24-16. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Remove from the table, not remove totally. Alderman Lopez didn't vote, but we're good.
Larry. So now
yeah.
before us is 024-016 regarding the time limit for public comment. I will make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, motion before us is to recommend final passage. Alderman Tebow, this is your legislation. Would you like to speak to it to start
Yes,
off?
please. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yeah, I mean, it's just simply, we don't, you know, the legislation or the ordinance currently says we have a time limit of, I believe, the first public comment is 30 minutes, the second one's 15 minutes. We never hold to that, ever. And so I think it puts us in a place where if all of a sudden one meeting, the president, whoever that may be, whether it's Alderman Wilshire today or somebody else in the future, all of a sudden starts enacting that, we're not being equal to what we've done in the past. And so I think we need to make a decision on whether we're gonna keep it and actually implement it or get rid of it. Otherwise, anytime we decide to go either way, we're kind of looking like we're not being equal to the public. So I just think we remove the time limit. If we ever get to a place where we feel that time limits are needed, we either go back to one or and put in an ordinance, or we, you know, I think to a certain extent the president has a certain allowance to do certain things within her or his power at times. So that's all, just simply removing the time limit. It really wouldn't change anything today because we let people go as long as we can within their 3 minutes of a lot of time. We let the session go as long as we have people there. A good example of that was when we had the barriers and we let everybody speak for 3 minutes at a time, and it went forever. So that's the ordinance.
Okay. Alderman Senate. And then Alderman Lopez,
No,
was
I'm
that a
just stretching,
scratch or your hand?
Stretching.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. No, I'm in total agreement with Alderman Tebow that we do have this on the books. It's, we either need to rip the Band-Aid off and start enforcing it or just get rid of it. And I don't have any real strong opinions one way or the other in regard to which one we should pick. I do have one concern, which I have already spoken off camera to Alderman Tebow about, which is the full ordinance regarding the Board of Aldermen's order of business. Right now, the legislation before us specifically takes care of section 9A, subsection 16, which pertains specifically to our second public comment period. Ordinance 2416, however, does not mention anything to subsection 9A, which covers our first public comment period, which also has the 15-minute restriction currently attached to it. So I think if we're going to do one, then we'd be behooved to do both at the same time.
Alderman Clemens. Well, actually, no, yeah, Alderman Clemens.
Okay.
Your hand wasn't up before. You were scratching. Go ahead.
True.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And I don't know, I guess I will throw this out there to anyone who may know. Do the committees have time limits as well on the, like, overall time limits, like these two?
That was the, yeah, I'm gonna do it right now. It's a good question.
Because I would be in favor of just eliminating those overall time periods, because I feel that they're unnecessary at this point, because we give each speaker 3 minutes. That should be it. That should be our standard, right? Every individual can go up, they get 3 minutes. They can say what they want, you know, in the first one pertaining to business and the second one pertaining to anything. And to me, that's the equitable thing to do.
Alderman Lopez.
So I think the suggestion of taking the limitation off the beginning part of the meeting is maybe a little complicated, because it could theoretically be possible to filibuster a meeting by having so many people with comment on something to be acted on that you really can't get to the actual action point. So I think if we did take that out, we should also maybe leave some sort of formal authority with the president to say, okay, So we need to have the actual discussion or the meeting. There may be other business at hand. We can't have 50 people show up and all use 3 minutes just to wear the alderman out. At the end, where it's open-ended and it's more like your chance to come and talk to the board, I say we all got elected and we'll just sit here until it's done. And I don't think it's fair that we have indirectly implied that only the first 5 people will get to speak because it's 3 minutes and 15 minutes long. So I'm very much in favor of taking the second part out, but the first part out, taking the first one out, I'd be cautious and I would make sure that we think that through before we change it so that we do include a mechanism for saying, okay, well, we want to hear comments, but also we have to be able to act.
Alderman Sutta, did you have your hand up?
No, I'm still researching the background.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When I look at 9A, and I know Alderman said it's 15 minutes. The one I'm showing here says 30 minutes for the first public comment under 9A. I don't know if I think I'm looking at the right one.
If I could.
Alderman Sutta?
Yeah, so I do see what Alderman Tebow is referring to here. Upon vote of a majority of the Board of Members present, the time for orally presented communications or comments may exceed 30 minutes due to additional speakers wanting to comment. I think what this implores us to do at that point is, should that time period be exceeded, we have to take a vote to go beyond those 30 minutes. So there, if I understand it correctly, there's 2 votes, one at 15 minutes to exceed the initial 15 minutes, and then a potential second to go over the 30 minutes.
Alderman Tebow, I couldn't see your hand, sir.
Thank you, that's okay. Thanks, Madam Chair. That's how the Board of Ed does it. So, or you did it when I went to meetings, a couple of years ago. They would get to a 15 minutes and then the chairperson would say, all right, we need to vote to see if we want to go extend it for another 15 minutes. Because obviously Board of Ed sometimes has issues that you get a ton of people, teachers, everything else that want to speak. So they have that mechanism to continue to extend it. Yeah, I don't know, I mean, Alderman Lopez brings up a good point about what to do in that first one. I mean, our biggest one was the barriers. I mean, the room was full, and we had a lot of people. I mean, we were here till...
Your biggest one.
I think we were
You
here
came
till-
on after the
My-
Performing
yeah,
Arts
my
Center
biggest
one.
We
That's
were
why I was
here
like,
till
if it gets to
so-
midnight, maybe we should have a plan.
Yeah, I don't know, planning board does a thing where they kind of say, we're gonna let public comment go till this time, and then, we're done the meeting. And sometimes they'll let it go to, they'll say, we'll end the meeting, we're ending the meeting at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. Whatever happens, we might have to extend the conversation with the board itself to another meeting. And obviously Alderman Senate, I think, has seen that before with the asphalt plant, so.
Alderman Clemmons.
I think as a board, we need to be cognizant of what is a major issue and what, are routine things. And when you have something as controversial as the barriers, or I can remember the Broad Street Parkway,
Center for the Arts.
those issues are probably, the Performing Arts Center. I mean, stuff like that really, you have a divided community and there's a lot of passion on either side of the issue. We should allow people to speak because not all of those things have public hearings. The Performing Arts Center did because it had to do, it had several of them because there was bonds. There was different legislation that had to be done for that. The same thing with the Broad Street Parkway. But I don't think the barriers had a public hearing. I mean, it was just a piece of legislation that went through its normal committee process, And so, I think we have the ability, although we don't like to do it, we have the ability to call a special meeting. So we could decide to not put a large piece of legislation like that we know is going to attract 100 people with comments to its own night and do that. I mean, the president can do that. 8 members of this board can suggest that, and we can have a meeting. So we need, I think, but for overall, like for our regular meetings, most of the time we don't have, we might have a handful of people that show up. And if it ever get to the point where it was, an hour long, I say good. That means people are engaged. They're coming to us, they're listening to what's going on, and they care enough to show up and sit there and say something about it. And to me, they should get that time. And if we have to sit here and we have to listen to that for 2 or 3 hours, whatever it may be, then that's what we signed up to do. So, to me, it's one of those things where I think we should just get rid of the overall time limits and just be cognizant of the fact that sometimes there's going to be controversial things that come up, and maybe we should plan on doing a special meeting that's just on that topic, just so that we can either pass or deny that legislation, so that we have time, so that the public has time to comment and that we have time to move on to other business. So that would be my suggestion. But to me, I think getting rid of the overall time periods is a good thing.
Alderman Senate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to further that point, we do have mechanisms in place that I think do a pretty decent job of controlling the stream of public comment so that it's not, taken over, filibustered, whatever terminology you want to use. And I feel as though our board president has been pretty good about enforcing that, in particular the sign-up process. I think it's fair, it's accessible. She's been really good, especially recently, about making sure that that's not abused in a way that it could be. And so I feel like with that in place, maintaining our public comment the way it is, irrespective of a larger time limit, with everybody allowed to have their 3 minutes to say their piece, I could be in full support of that.
I'm going to weigh in here. I feel that we shouldn't be limiting how long the public can speak to us. I wasn't comfortable with it when it came in front of us the first time, and I am happy to see this go, because to previous points, that's our job, is to listen to people, and if they want to come and talk to us about a piece of legislation, we need to hear it. And we've already put this 3 minutes in, so that does have some sort of limitation as to how long each individual speaker can be there. But that's what we're here for. That's what we need to do. So I'm in favor of removing it in all places. To the maker of the motion, we're about to do that, Alderman Clemens.
Well, yeah, except I don't know what section that is, so I don't know if either the sponsor or Alderman Senate knows or could make that motion.
514, section 9A.
So would the motion to be amend by including or striking from that area?
So we would first need to include section 9A in the legislation, because it's currently not. And then I think we would need to specify which sections of that we would want to strike. Which, I don't know, we could workshop. I don't know, I have it in front of me in my Google document.
Alderman Tebow, this is your piece of legislation. How would you like to
Well, I can't make the motion, but.
I know you can't, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Actually, you could, because you're the primary sponsor.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I would like to do what you guys are saying. I mean, I'd strike the time limit out of 9A, which is the 15 minutes, and then the 30-minute piece at the end.
Also remove the 30 piece?
Well, yeah, at that point.
Because we don't need it at that point.
We don't need it at that point.
All right, so what I've got here in front of me, bear with me just a moment.
I'll let you do it.
Oh, boy, I underlined.
Oh,
We don't want to underline, that's adding.
It's adding emphasis.
All right. So what I've got is that we would include 9A, which reads that a period not to exceed 15 minutes for the acceptance of orally presented communications or comments from the public or others relative to resolutions, ordinances, communications to be accepted in subsection A 9B, upon which final action is expected to be taken at the meeting. If there is a reasonable expectation by the board, president of the board, that final action shall be taken on such an item not on the agenda, the president shall allow comment on that item of business. Upon vote of a majority of the board members present, the time for orally presented communications or comments may exceed 30 minutes due to additional speakers wanting to comment. We would strike from that section the language stating not to exceed 15 minutes and the language of the entire final sentence upon a vote of the majority of board members present for 30 minutes.
Correct.
Everybody follow that? We can have legal clean it up so that it's nice and clean for our
And I'm
full
not
board
even
meeting.
gonna ask Donna to interpret my chicken scratch. I'm gonna email these amendments to her.
So the motion is to amend with
I'll
the
make that motion
aforementioned.
appropriate.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. That still carries. Okay. So then we need to move to send as amended?
Recommend final passage as amended, yes.
Okay, is there discussion on that motion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Lovely work this evening. That motion carries. Okay. Funnily enough, we go into public comment. And we have no public here. General discussion? Any remarks by Alderman? All right. Alderman Clemmons.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned at 8:51 PM.
You say